Welcome back to the deep dive. Um, Today we are opening up a black box that I think most of us, well, we keep it locked tight in the basement.
Yeah, usually under a pile of old laundry and unsaid
Yeah,
apologies.
exactly. Today we are talking about the engine of intimacy. We're unpacking sexual desire. And I really want to start by acknowledging something that I think everyone listening to this has felt at some point, which is the absolute maddening frustration of the on-off switch.
Right, the switch metaphor.
Yeah.
It's so pervasive. It's the cultural script we are handed from movies, from novels, um, even from really bad sex education. We are taught that desire is this binary
You're
thing.
either in the mood or you're not.
Exactly. You're in the mood, which means the light is on, everything is blazing, you're good to go. Or you're not in the mood, and it is just total darkness.
Right. And if you're in a relationship and that light is off, you immediately panic. You think, is it the bulb broken? Is the wiring bad? Do I not love this person anymore?
Or worse, if you're the one whose light is off, you feel broken. You feel like a defective appliance.
Yeah, a defective appliance. That's exactly it.
And that binary view,
Hmm.
honestly, it's the source of so much suffering. It pathologizes what are often very normal fluctuations.
Mm.
But when you actually look at the stack of research we have on the table today,
And we have a serious stack today.
we really do. We're looking at data ranging from the Mayo Clinic to the Archives of Sexual Behavior. And when you look at it, it becomes incredibly clear that desire isn't a switch at all. It's not a mechanical toggle. It is an ecosystem.
An ecosystem. I love that imagery so much because, in an ecosystem, you have rain, you have drought, you have seasons. If the soil quality changes, the plants change, it's highly responsive.
Precisely. It is a complex feedback loop. It involves your biology, your psychology, your relationship dynamics, and even your sociology. So we're going to move way beyond this idea of I'm just not in the mood today. We're looking at hormones, attachment styles, and this really fascinating concept called the dual control model.
And the mission for this deep dive is really to completely deconstruct that black box. Because I think there is just so much shame wrapped up in this for you, the listener. You might be in a couple where one person is constantly chasing and the other is distancing.
Right.
Or you have people wondering why their drive just vanished into thin air after a certain age or a specific life event.
There is immense shame. And the sources we have today from medical journals like the American Academy of Family Physicians,
Yeah.
psychological studies from the University of Liège, sociological reports on refusal, they all point to one single thing. There is hard science behind why we want sex and why we don't.
And when you understand the system, you can finally stop blaming yourself or blaming your partner.
Exactly. You can look at it systematically.
So let's open up the hood. Let's look at the hardware first. Because I think we so often jump straight to the emotional side, right? We say, oh, we need to go to therapy, we need to communicate better. But sometimes the machinery itself is just running on empty.
You can't talk your way out of a biological shutdown.
No, you really can't.
You cannot ignore the biology. We have to start with the hormonal foundation, which means we have to talk about testosterone.
The big T. Now, I think most listeners hear testosterone and they instantly picture a bodybuilder, or they think it's strictly a male hormone, but it's actually the baseline for everyone, right?
It is. It's the hungry for sex hormone. Now, while men have significantly higher levels, it plays a critical role in female physiology too. But if we specifically look at male physiology for a moment, testosterone is the fuel for the engine. It creates the drive, the actual physical appetite.
And our source from Psychology Today mentions that for most men, this is a pretty reliable resource for a large part of their lives. It's like having a full tank of gas by default.
Generally, yes, it is. But those levels do drop. And it's not just about aging, although obviously that plays a part. What the research really highlights is that general health issues can crash T levels dramatically. We're talking about things like diabetes, obesity, and chronic stress.
So it's deeply metabolic.
Completely metabolic. When those levels drop, it's not just that the erection suffers, though, that is a major invisible indicator. It's that the mental hunger simply evaporates. The brain stops signaling that sex is a priority. It's like the check engine light is on, but the driver is completely asleep at the wheel.
So if a partner is noticing a major drop in desire, it might not be a personal rejection of them at all. It might literally be that his insulin resistance is messing with his hormone production.
Exactly. It's a hardware issue.
Oh.
Now, on the flip side, looking at female physiology, the Mayo Clinic data on estrogen was really eye-opening regarding how physical changes directly physically kill desire.
This is where that light switch metaphor really, really fails for women especially. Because it's not just a mood thing.
No. Not at all. When estrogen drops, and this happens most notably during menopause, but we also see it postpartum and during breastfeeding, the body physically changes. The tissues in the pelvis actually receive less blood flow. The vaginal lining thins out, it becomes much less elastic.
Which leads to dryness, naturally.
It leads to dryness, yes, but more importantly, it leads to dyspareunia.
Dyspareunia, that's the formal medical term for painful intercourse, right?
Correct. And this creates what we call the pain loop. This is so crucial for listeners to understand. If sex hurts physically, even just a little bit, a stinging sensation, a minor friction burn the brain, which is ultimately a survival machine, starts to anticipate that pain.
It recategorizes the act of sex entirely. It stops being intimacy or pleasure, and it starts being threat or pain.
Exactly. So the next time a partner initiates, the brain says, warning, danger, pain ahead, and it shuts down desire instantly. It is a protective mechanism. The body is effectively saying, I am not going to let you do this because it hurts me.
That is such a key distinction. The body isn't broken, it's trying to protect you.
Right.
But then there's this other massive factor that I feel like nobody talks about enough when we talk about biology, the medication factor.
Oh, yes.
We are a heavily medicated society, and it seems like half the things sitting in our medicine cabinets right now are just absolute libido assassins.
It is the silent suppressor. The American Academy of Family Physicians, the AAFP, they have some staggering data on this. The biggest culprit, by far, is often SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These are your standard, everyday antidepressants, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil.
Which are life-saving drugs for millions of people. I really want to be clear here. We aren't telling anyone listening to go flush their meds down the toilet.
Absolutely not. They are vital. But we have to deeply understand the trade-off happening in the brain. The mechanism that helps stabilize a person's mood by increasing serotonin often has a severe dampening effect on dopamine. And dopamine is the core driver of reward and pleasure. It's the I want that chemical.
So you manage to stabilize the mood, which is great, but you completely flatten the desire in the process.
You get reduced libido, delayed ejaculation, or anorgasmia, which is the inability to reach orgasm at all. And the AAFP source highlighted a massive gap here between doctors and patients.
The silence gap. I found this part of the research so sad, honestly.
Right. The data shows the patients rarely, if ever, volunteer this side effect to their doctors. They think, well, I'm depressed, so of course I don't want sex. Or they're just simply too embarrassed to bring it up in a clinical setting. And doctors rarely ask because they are hyper-focused on treating the primary mood disorder. They're checking to see if you're suicidal. They aren't checking if you're orgasmic.
But the stat in the paper was incredible. When doctors do actually ask directly,
Patients are 4 times more likely to reveal they are having sexual dysfunction. 4 times. That suggests there is a massive population of people out there suffering in total silence, thinking their relationship is dying, when it might just be the chemistry of their daily prescription.
and there are biological solutions to this, right? The sources specifically mentioned bupropion.
Yes, Wellbutrin. It's kind of an outlier in the antidepressant world. It works on dopamine and norepinephrine rather than serotonin. So it can actually increase libido in some cases. Sometimes a doctor will even prescribe it as an antidote to the SSRI side effects.
So the takeaway for you listening is check your medicine cabinet. But it's not just antidepressants, is it?
No. Blood pressure medications are notorious for this,
Right.
opioids, and even hormonal birth control. There is strong evidence that oral contraceptives can lower free testosterone in women. It literally takes the edge off that baseline hunger.
It's just a cruel irony, isn't it? You take the pill so you can have sex without the pregnancy risk, but the pill alters your hormones so you might not want the sex in the first place.
It's a very cruel irony, but an incredibly common one.
Yeah.
And then just briefly on the hardware side, we have to touch on general flaccal illness. If you have the flu, or if you are dealing with a chronic condition like multiple sclerosis or heart disease, the body basically reallocates its resources.
It's triage.
It is a perfect triage system. If you are fighting an acute illness or if you are managing intense chronic pain, your body prioritizes survival and healing over reproduction and pleasure. It simply shuts down the luxury systems. And sex, biologically speaking, is a luxury system when you are in strict survival mode.
Okay, so that's the hardware, the hormones, the blood flow, the neurotransmitters, the triage system. But let's say the hardware is actually functioning perfectly fine. The hormones are balanced. You aren't on any libido-killing meds. We have to look at the software next. Psychology.
And this brings us to the dual control model. Honestly, this is probably the single most helpful framework for anyone trying to understand their own desire. It was developed by researchers at the Kinsey Institute.
I love this model because it's so incredibly intuitive. It's the gas and the brake.
It simplifies the massive complexity of the brain beautifully. The model suggests our brains have two very distinct systems for sex. One is the sexual excitation system, the SES. That's the gas pedal. Its entire job is to notice sexual cues in the environment. Oh, that person smells good. Oh, there's a romantic scene in this movie. My partner just touched the back of my neck. It revs you up.
And then you have the sexual inhibition system, the SIS, the brake pedal.
The brake. And the brake's job is to notice every single reason not to have sex. It is a highly evolved threat detection system. I'm stressed about this project at work. I feel bloated today. I hear the kids moving around in the hallway upstairs. I'm angry at my partner right now. And the revelation here, and this was the huge aha moment for me reading through this, is that low desire isn't always a lack of gas. You might actually have plenty of gas. You might deeply love your partner, find them incredibly attractive, want to be physically close to them,
Mhm.
but you're pressing the brake pedal to the floor.
Exactly. And if you have your foot slammed on the brake, it literally does not matter how much gas you give it. The car isn't moving. This is exactly why spicing it up with fancy lingerie or a weekend vacation so often fails if the brake, the underlying stress, or the insecurity isn't released first. You're just revving the engine while the parking brake is engaged. Eventually, you're just going to smell burning rubber. Now, this connects perfectly to that fascinating study from the University of Liège, which was published in the Archives of Sexual Behavior. They looked at very specific psychological profiles regarding how people experience desire. And they found these distinct groups based on how their internal gas and brakes are tuned.
They did. They used cluster analysis to group people, and they found three really revealing profiles. Understanding which one you or your partner might fit into can completely change how you view your entire sex life.
Let's break them down for the listener. Profile A was called the dyadic profile.
Right, these are the people with high sexual satisfaction. Dyadic just means relating to the couple dynamic, the two of them.
Right.
These people had a high desire for partner sex. Psychologically, they scored very high on something called approach motivation.
Approach motivation, meaning they're driven by the carrot, not the stick. They're moving towards something good.
Exactly. They actively seek out rewards, connection, and pleasure. They're leaning into the gas. But the key differentiator for this group was that they also scored exceptionally high on mindfulness.
Mindfulness is a word that keeps popping up in all the health and wellness literature, but specifically here, in the bedroom, what does it actually do for sex?
In this specific context, mindfulness means being fully present in the moment without judgment. It prevents what sex therapists call spectatoring.
Spectatoring. That's when you're essentially watching yourself have sex, right? Like you're hovering above the bed thinking, do I look okay from this angle? Is this taking too long? Did I remember to lock the front door?
Exactly. You become a literal spectator of your own performance. You step out of your physical body to mentally judge it. Mindfulness shuts that inner critic down. It allows you to actually feel the physical sensations. The dyadic group had this perfect balance. They had the gas, the approach motivation, but they also had the mindfulness to regulate their own brake pedal. They could stay in the room.
Then we have profile B, which they called the solitary or impulsive profile. This one was a bit more complex.
Yes, this group had a high desire for masturbation, but reported significantly lower relationship satisfaction. They scored high on sensation-seeking and impulsivity. But the study found a gender nuance here that I think is really important to highlight. For men in this group, the high frequency of masturbation often correlated with lower self-control in general. It strongly suggested they were using solo sex as a coping mechanism.
So it's like, I feel bad, or I feel stressed, or I feel anxious, so I will engage in this solitary act to quickly fix my mood. But it doesn't actually connect them to their partner at all.
Precisely. It's a quick dopamine hit. It's not an intimacy builder. It is essentially self-medication. Now, for women, the data was a bit more mixed, sometimes high masturbation linked to higher self-esteem. But generally, this solitary profile was very distinct from the high satisfaction couple profile. It suggests a real disconnection between the physical act of sex and the relational bond.
And finally, we have profile C, the avoidant profile.
These are the folks with their foot heavy on the brake. Low desire for partner sex and also low desire for masturbation. They scored high on avoidance motivation, which is a deep fear of negative consequences, and they scored high on insecure attachment. They aren't seeking pleasure at all. They are entirely focused on trying to avoid danger or emotional vulnerability.
That transition to avoidance really leads us perfectly into the next major block of our deep dive, We've talked about the biology, we've talked about the gas and the brake, but what actually presses the brake the hardest in our daily lives? It's almost always mental health. Specifically, we're talking about depression, burnout, and anxiety.
The interruption, we can call it. And depression is the absolute heavyweight here. The AAFP source describes a brutal bidirectional relationship. Depression fundamentally kills libido, but then the resulting loss of intimacy worsens the depression. It's a downward spiral.
And the statistic was that 70% of depressed patients report a total loss of sexual interest.
70%. And often, patients will report that this loss of sexual interest is actually more distressing to them than the mood symptoms themselves. It feels like a core loss of human vitality. This is anhedonia, the clinical inability to feel pleasure. If your brain literally cannot feel pleasure from eating a good meal or watching a beautiful sunset or laughing at a joke, you certainly aren't going to feel it from sexual intimacy.
Then there is burnout. We have a specific study on burnout, the Papastathios study from Greece, that found a really interesting gender divide in how stress manifests in the bedroom.
This study was fascinating. They looked at medical residents, obviously a very high stress, high burnout group, and measured exactly how that burnout affected their sex lives. For men, the strongest predictor of sexual dysfunction was what they categorized as personal burnout.
Personal burnout, meaning I am physically exhausted, I am depleted as a human being.
Right. And for men, that deeply internalized sense of total depletion hit their erectile function and their overall satisfaction directly. The researchers suggest that men might internalize this burnout as a systemic failure of the self, a feeling of I am broken, which completely kills the confidence required for sexual performance.
And what did it look like for women?
For women, the absolute strongest predictor was job stress.
That seems like a really subtle distinction. What is the actual difference between personal burnout and job stress in this specific context?
The analysis suggests that women experienced the job stress as a profound physical depletion. The external stressor, the relentless demands of the job, the schedule, the tasks, depleted the actual physical energy reserves required for the body to engage. It wasn't an internalized I am a failure, it was a very literal I am entirely empty.
It completely shuts down the parasympathetic nervous system.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that brings us right to anxiety. Anxiety triggers the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Biologically, sexual arousal strictly requires the parasympathetic system, rest and digest. These are physiologically antagonistic systems. You literally cannot be in fight or flight and in a state of sexual arousal at the exact same time.
It makes perfect evolutionary sense when you think about it. If you are running from a bear in the woods, your body shouldn't be stopping to procreate.
Exactly. And anxiety puts a bear in the bedroom. Whether that bear is performance anxiety, like will I get an erection, will I be able to orgasm, or general life anxiety, how are we going to pay the mortgage this month? The physiological result is exactly the same. The body forcefully shunts blood away from the genitals and pushes it toward the major muscle groups so you can run away.
So we have the hardware, the software, and these massive glitches in the system like depression and burnout. But sex doesn't happen in a vacuum, does it? It usually happens between two people. And this is where it gets really messy, the relational dynamics.
The space between. This is honestly where most of the actual therapy work happens. And the absolute #1 issue that couples bring to sex therapy is desire discrepancy.
Which is really just the clinical fancy way of saying, I want it more than you do, or you want it more than I do.
Right, it's the gap between partners. And the Wikipedia source on this brings up a concept called heteronormativity theory. In heterosexual pairings, we often pathologize the person with the lower desire. Statistically, that's often the woman as having the problem that needs fixing. But this theory suggests we need to completely zoom out and look at the context of their daily lives.
The laundry, the dishes, the mental load of managing a household.
Exactly. When household labor and childcare are highly inequitable, women's desire plummets. It is not a biological malfunction. It is a highly rational response to exhaustion and inequity. It's the touched out phenomenon.
Touched out. I think a lot of parents listening right now just nodded their heads vigorously.
If a woman has been holding a toddler, managing a chaotic schedule, cleaning up messes, and basically being a physical and emotional scaffold for everyone else's needs all day long, her body feels like a tool that belongs to others. She desperately needs to reclaim her body for herself before she can even think about sharing it with a partner. If she hasn't had 5 minutes of basic physical autonomy, a hand resting on her waist doesn't feel like affection. It feels like yet another demand.
It's incredibly hard to feel sexy when you feel like a servant in your own home.
It's impossible. Desire inherently requires a sense of autonomy and freedom.
Now, what about outside of the heterosexual dynamic? Because the sources did touch on same-sex couples, and it's so interesting how the dynamics shift when you remove those traditional gender roles.
Yes, and it really challenges some of our core assumptions. For lesbian couples, the research consistently shows a lower frequency of sexual encounters compared to other couple types,
This is the famous lesbian bed death myth, right?
which is largely criticized now by researchers as a myth, or at the very least, a deep misunderstanding of female sexuality. Because while the actual frequency of events might be lower, the reported emotional intimacy and overall sexual satisfaction levels are often much higher. The very definition of sex in these relationships might be much broader. It's often more sensual, much less focused on a specific genital act that has a clear, defined start and finish line.
So they aren't keeping score the same way. It's a focus on quality over quantity.
In many cases, yes. Conversely, gay men generally report a higher frequency of sex than lesbian couples, but they face very unique pressures regarding body image and aging in a community that often places an incredibly high premium on physical aesthetics.
Hmm.
So the brake pedal for them might be body dysmorphia or severe aging anxiety.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, there is one word that came up in the Psychology Today article by Antonita Contreras that I think scares absolutely everyone who has ever been in a long-term relationship: resentment.
Resentment is the ultimate intimacy killer. It is absolute poison to the sexual ecosystem.
How does it work, mechanically speaking, to kill sex?
Contreras explains that resentment often starts as a protective buffer. You feel deeply hurt or powerless in the relationship, so you slowly put up a wall of resentment to stop caring quite so much. It protects you from immediate emotional pain, but it completely erodes trust over time.
And you cannot be physically vulnerable with someone you don't emotionally trust.
Precisely. And it manifests as passive resistance. Refusing sex becomes a subconscious way to reclaim power in the dynamic. It's an unspoken physical way of saying, you hurt me, so I am going to withhold this thing that you want.
And the scary part is sometimes the person refusing doesn't even realize they are doing it out of anger. They just genuinely feel, I'm just not in the mood.
That is the unconscious block. You might consciously think you want to be close to your partner, but your body remembers the score. Deep-seated resentment suppresses the biological signals of affection and admiration. You literally cannot get aroused because your nervous system views the partner as a threat or an antagonist.
That leads right into attachment styles, which is another massive layer of this relational puzzle we're putting together.
Right, we have secure attachment, where you are generally comfortable with intimacy and you naturally use sex to connect. That's the ideal state. But then you have anxious attachment.
The anxious style. These are the people who might use sex to seek reassurance from their partner.
Yes. The internal monologue is, do you still love me? Okay, prove it to me. Sex becomes a high-stakes barometer for the relationship safety. This can lead to what we call compliant sex. Having sex not because you actually physically desire it, but because you are terrified of losing the partner if you say no.
That sounds incredibly exhausting for both people.
It is exhausting. It transforms sex into a chore, or almost like a tax you pay to keep the relationship secure. And then, on the other end, you have the avoidance style. These individuals fiercely prize their autonomy. For them, too much intimacy feels like emotional engulfment. So they may intentionally distance themselves sexually to maintain that feeling of independence. Sex feels like a literal threat to their boundaries.
So you might have a classic dynamic of an anxious person constantly chasing an avoidant person. The anxious person wants sex to feel safe, and the avoidant person refuses sex to feel safe.
The classic trap. And unless they can clearly understand that underlying dynamic, they will just assume they have mismatched libidos, when really they have mismatched fears.
This brings us to the final, and maybe the most important piece of the entire puzzle today: the act of saying no, the anatomy of refusal.
We absolutely have to normalize the no. In any healthy relationship, the no is just as important as the yes. If you cannot say no safely, your yes doesn't actually mean anything.
That is such a powerful statement. If you can't say no safely, your yes doesn't mean anything.
It's entirely true. Refusal is a boundary. It is essential information. And the synthesis report we have on this categorizes refusal into these clear buckets: physical, psychological, relational, and sociocultural.
We've touched quite a bit on the physical and psychological, but the sociocultural reasons are really fascinating.
These are the invisible scripts running in the background of our minds. Religious guilt from childhood. or identifying as asexual, where the refusal isn't about the partner at all, but about a fundamental orientation level lack of sexual attraction, or even political refusal, actively rejecting traditional heteronormative scripts of what a good partner is obligated to do.
And there are heavy gendered nuances to how we say no, too.
Huge ones. For men, the cultural script is relentless. Men are always ready. Men always want it. So when a man refuses, maybe because he's stressed or exhausted or just feeling emotionally disconnected, he often feels immense crushing shame. He feels like he is fundamentally failing at being a man.
So instead of just saying that, he might blame it on work or make a sarcastic joke or get defensive and pick a fight, rather than just saying, hey, I just feel disconnected right now.
Because he likely hasn't ever been socialized to articulate that emotional disconnection kills his desire just as much as it does for women. He's culturally expected to function like a hydraulic machine.
And for women.
For women, the refusal is often deeply tied to that mental load we discussed earlier. The refusal is a desperate, necessary attempt to protect her own dwindling energy reserves. It's pure self-preservation. The feeling is, I have given absolutely everything to everyone all day long. I cannot give one more ounce of my physical self away.
The report also mentions that the response to the refusal is critical, how the partner reacts.
It determines the entire future of the sex life. If a partner says no, and the response is guilt-tripping, coldness, passive aggression, or anger, that creates what psychologists call anti-appetitive motivation.
Anti-appetitive, meaning you lose your appetite entirely.
It means active aversion. You start to actively dread the initiation because you know the refusal will inevitably lead to a fight or a punishment. So the very concept of sex becomes a source of deep anxiety, not pleasure. The safest, best response to a no is simply, okay, I hear you. Is everything okay? Do you just need a cuddle, or do you need some space tonight?
Because that safety, that non-judgmental acceptance, is what allows the gas pedal to potentially work again in the future.
Exactly. You remove the threat.
So we have unpacked a massive amount of information here. We've looked at the hardware, the testosterone levels, the estrogen drops, the medication side effects. We've looked at the software depression, burnout, and that Kinsey dual control model of gas and brakes. We've looked at the space between resentment, attachment styles, the mental load, and we've looked at the fundamental right to refuse.
It's a truly systemic view of desire. That is a core takeaway for anyone listening.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, listening to this right now?
It means that sexual desire is a barometer. It is a highly sensitive barometer of your overall health, your physical health, your mental health, and your relational health. If the desire is chronically low, it's not just a broken light switch you need to force back on. It is a check engine light on your dashboard.
It's telling you something else entirely is going on under the hood.
Right. It's not just about trying to fix the sex. It's about asking the deeper questions. Are you completely burned out at work? Are you holding on to deep resentment toward your partner? Are your hormones unbalanced? Are you taking a daily medication that is chemically suppressing your drive? Are you feeling emotionally unsafe in your own home?
It changes the fundamental question from what is wrong with me to what is my body trying to tell me right now?
Yeah, that's the essential shift in perspective.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought that really struck me while we were prepping the research for this deep dive. We so often treat low desire as the enemy. We treat it as a medical dysfunction that needs to be eradicated. But based on absolutely everything we've discussed today, the pain loop, the stress response, the biological protection against resentment, what if low desire is actually a sign of a perfectly functioning system?
That is the real provocative thought here. If you are exhausted or emotionally unsafe or in physical pain, your body should shut down desire. That is your nervous system working exactly as designed to protect you. So instead of trying to artificially force the desire back online, maybe we need to actually thank the body for the warning signal and go fix the environment that triggered the shutdown in the first place.
That is a completely different, almost revolutionary way to look at it. Instead of fighting your body, actually listen to it.
Curiosity over judgment, always.
Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly complex ecosystem today.
It was my absolute pleasure.
And to you listening, take a deep breath, check your gas pedal, check your brakes, and maybe check in with your partner tonight without any expectations. We'll see you on the next deep dive.